April is Celebrate Diversity Month, and I think this is the perfect time for the Table of Diversity to shine. So, as the creator of the Table of Diversity, I'm going to walk you through all things Table of Diversity related, diversity, equity, and inclusion related. We're going to talk about how you can utilize this tool in your workplace, how you can utilize it in your community, in your home, as you're talking to your kids, in school, in your homeowners association, at church, everywhere. Because in my world, diversity, equity, and inclusion are not just work things. It's a lifestyle. It's something that happens everywhere, all the time, with everyone. So, my name is Demetria. I'm the creator of the Table of Diversity. If this is your first time ever seeing the Table of Diversity, welcome. If you are a Table of Diversity person who's used it forever and ever and ever, welcome back. I hope that in this series, you'll learn some things that maybe you didn't know, or it will help you rethink how you're currently implementing and operationalizing diversity, equity, and inclusion in your sphere of influence. So first, let's dive in. Let's just talk about it. The Table of Diversity probably looks very familiar to you. I mean, if you've ever taken a chemistry class in high school, middle school, or college, then you're very familiar with the periodic table of elements. The Table of Diversity was modeled after that. So I majored in chemistry for 2.5 years in college, where I failed miserably. That's a video for another day. But soon after, I started really learning about and becoming interested in diversity, equity, and inclusion at work. And it was really more organizational development, psychology, those sorts of things. And as I was learning and translating it for the people that I worked with so that I could come back to my job and teach them, there was just some things that I couldn't translate very well. Especially based on my experience. So for example, I'd go to a class and we'd talk about women at work. I'd go to another class, we'd talk about people of color at work. I'd go to another class, we talk about people with disabilities at work. And in each one of those classes, I learned a lot, but I couldn't really bring my entire experience to any one of those things. And that's when I learned about intersectionality. And back 10 years ago when I created this tool, intersectionality was not as mainstream as it is today. It was not something that very many people knew about. The word, the concept itself, which has been around forever, folks knew about, but the word was still kind of new. And so as I learned more about intersectionality, I was like, this is the piece that's missing. This is what everyone needs to know when we're talking about diversity specifically. But I had a really hard time talking about it, like explaining it. I could not get my words to come out the way that they were in my head. So I knew I needed a tool. My background is in learning and development. And if you know anything about learning and development, training, you got to have a visual. You got to have something you can show people so that they understand it more effectively and grasp the concepts efficiently. So I started thinking, how can I describe diversity, but also take it to the next level and talk about intersectionality in one tool that all made sense, that folks could easily understand. And so that's where my chemistry background came into play, because I thought about, in our chemistry class, we first learned about the individual elements, right? You learn about oxygen, you learn about hydrogen, carbon, so on and so forth. And then you start learning about the compounds like H2O, H2O2, so on and so forth. And I thought, wait a minute, might be onto something here, because that's exactly how we should think about diversity. We need to know these individual elements, like what it means to be Black, what it means to be a woman, what it means to be trans, so on and so forth. But we also need to know what it's like to be a Black trans woman. Those intersections of identity are really important. And just like in chemistry, when those intersections of identity come together, it's not just layered one on top of another. They're mixed up, they're jumbled, and they create a brand new identity that has a completely different experience than the individual elements it's composed of. And that's the exact same way with diversity. So I had many renditions of the Table of Diversity, and the version that you're seeing behind me here is the latest version. Every 2 years it goes through an update as language changes, as we really rethink identity, and people start to say, this is how I want to be identified based on what makes me feel the most seen, heard, and valued. So the table of diversity in its most simplest form does three things. One, expands our definition of diversity, because if you think about it, most of the time diversity is just talked about in terms of the protected classes, race, gender identity, religion sometimes, what else? Age, those things that, based on the government, are protected classes that can't be discriminated against. Well, we know there's so much more to identity and diversity than those things. They are important. The goal is not to overshadow them, but it's to expand how we think about diversity so that we are looking at the entire person. We're considering more aspects of their identity, and we are making space for more people. The second thing is intersectionality, and I like to call them diversity compounds because it's chemistry, duh. But when we think about compounds in chemistry, we think about all of these various elements coming together and creating something brand new. And the same is true when we think about the table of diversity. Intersectionality is the foundation for that. But when we think about diversity compounds, it's not just those marginalized identities that come together and create something new. Most of the people that I'm speaking with, most of my audiences, it's a combination of both the marginalized identities, and then there's some privileged identities in there as well that completely transform how we talk about diversity, equity, and inclusion. It transforms and adds nuance to this ecosystem of privilege, marginalization, advantage, disadvantage. It complicates things that we have simplified so much that I think we have done a disservice to the solutions that we put in place to correct these things. So that's the second thing. Diversity compounds based on a foundation of intersectionality. The third thing is systemic advantages and disadvantages. When we think about identity, when we think about who's privileged and who's marginalized, we're really talking about the systems that are in play that create opportunities for people to be at an advantage, that create barriers that prevent people from experiencing advantages, being at a disadvantage. That's, in my work, the work that I'm doing with leaders, with people who have power, who are in positions of influence. That's the thing that I want them to focus on. I want folks to focus on the systems that we just are living and existing within so that we can facilitate meaningful change that is not just based on folks feeling good, checking a box, but is really transforming how we live, how we exist, how we just decide what happens on a day-to-day basis. So those are the three things. Expanding our definition of diversity to include all of these things, and we're going to do a deeper dive, don't worry. 2 is intersectionality, so looking at the intersections of identity. And 3 is looking at the system to ensure that as we're looking at each aspect of identity and its intersections, we're really understanding what's their experience in each of these systems. How are they experiencing life, and what can we do to facilitate an opportunity for them to do better? Because we want everyone to thrive. And if some people are not thriving, then we got to do better. So the table of diversity is free. It's a tool that I created. It's completely free. You go to tableofdiversity.com. You can get it, your free copy, and then stay tuned as we dive deeper into the table of diversity.